Teacher Ridicules, black boy who says his dad. Works at the Pentagon. Then his dad walks into the room. The whole class burst into laughter when Boniface Kelly said his father worked at the Pentagon. But none of them knew that man held secrets capable of shifting the course of national security. A gripping and dramatic story is unfolding. To continue the journey, hit like and subscribe to Black Strength Stories so you won't miss more powerful, dramatic stories. Bellington Heights Academy was unlike any other school in the state of Maryland. Tucked deep in the affluent northern suburbs of Montgomery County, where household incomes often surpassed $400,000 per year, the school stood as a symbol of tradition, inherited privilege, and generational power. With nearly 130 years of history, it had educated the children of senators, diplomats, corporate CEOs, people for whom power was a given, embedded in their bloodline. In a place where 91% of students were white, every vehicle parked at the school gates displayed unmistakable signs of status, from Porsche Cayennes and Audi A8s to the latest Maserati Ghiblis. Amid that line of gleaming cars, the dusty gray Toyota Camry sedan belonging to the Kelly family looked completely out of place, much like Boniface Kelly himself. Boniface, 10 years old, was one of only 2 black students in the entire 5th grade class. Every morning, he stood in front of the mirror in his small bedroom, adjusting the deep navy blue tie embroidered with the school's crest. He had learned how to tighten the knot just enough to look neat without choking himself. He had learned how to smile at the right moment, nod on cue, and keep himself from standing out in those pristine hallways, scented with wood polish. To his classmates, Boniface always tried to appear confident, but deep down he knew. Every step he took in this school was part of an invisible exam. The scrutinizing looks, the questions that sounded casual but carried suspicion, as if his very presence here was an anomaly that needed explaining. His father, Mr. Theophilus Kelly, was a mystery. Tall, lean, soft-spoken, he had never once shown up at a parent-teacher meeting, a school seminar, or any student performance. Other parents whispered the questions. What does he do? A driver? A security guard? Works in payroll? No one knew, and no one cared enough to find out. But Boniface knew. He knew his father worked every day in a 5-sided building guarded by 30,000 personnel and protected by a security system worth over $1 billion. A place only accessible to those with top-level clearance, the Pentagon. On career day, Boniface stood in front of the class, dressed in his crisply ironed uniform, holding a poster he had drawn the night before. He smiled as he began his presentation. My father is Mr. Theophilus Kelly. He works at the United States Department of Defense in the Pentagon. In that instant, the class fell silent. Then came a scoffing laugh from the front row. It was Kelsey, blonde-haired, wearing a Balenciaga hoodie, the son of a real estate mogul who controlled over 250 properties around the Potomac River. Well, the Pentagon, huh? Your dad must be cleaning the hallways then, right? A wave of laughter rippled through the classroom. Ms. Manfred, a woman in her 40s with a swept-up golden hairstyle and an expensive cream-colored suit, stood at the lectern, arms crossed. Instead of stepping in, she smiled coldly. Oh, she said, lips curling upward like she was auditioning for a play. So what does your dad do there? Hold the doors? Or maybe give tours? No one stopped those words. No one defended Boniface. To everyone in that room, a black boy standing up and saying his father worked at the Pentagon wasn't information. It was comedy. But what they didn't know was that just days from now, the name Theophilus Kelly would silence the entire school. And that day was coming faster than they thought. Boniface stood frozen in front of the blackboard. The sneering laughs, the doubtful glances that clung to his skin like needles. It wasn't the first time he'd been looked down on, but it was the first time he saw his dream and his pride in his father turned into a joke. Ms. Manfred didn't need to raise her voice. Her tone was gentle, almost polite to an outsider. But to Boniface, it was a blade, sweet, thin, and razor-sharp. "The Pentagon is a very important place, Boniface," she said, eyes still fixed on her gradebook. "Someone like your father wouldn't have a reason to be there." Baron, the only white student in the class who had once invited Boniface over, tried to raise his hand. "I've seen him, I swear. He had a security badge with a barcode, like in the movies." Ms. Manfred glanced at Baron like he had just claimed to be an alien. "Baron, Hollywood action movies aren't evidence. You should learn to tell the difference between fact and fiction." The lesson continued as if nothing had happened. But for Boniface, every minute after that felt like being buried alive in humiliation. He didn't cry. He just quietly sat down, his hands clenched white beneath the desk. At lunch break, Kelsey walked over to his table and muttered just loud enough for his group of friends to hear. "His dad probably sweeps floors at the Pentagon. Dresses up nice and pretends to be a director." Boniface didn't respond, but something inside him shattered. When he got home to the second-floor apartment in Elmwood, a modest housing complex made up mostly of African immigrant families, Boniface tossed his backpack onto the sofa and ran straight into his room, slamming the door shut. Theophilus was sitting at the desk, eyes fixed on the screen, but his voice rang out clearly. "What happened at school today?" Boniface didn't answer right away. Not until much later, when his father knocked gently on the door, did he finally say, "They laughed at me. Like I made you up. Like I don't have the right to be proud of you." Theophilus stood by the door, silent for a few seconds. Then he responded, in a voice as steady as steel. "You don't need them to believe it for it to be true. People laugh when they fear what they don't understand. And they don't understand your father. They never have." Boniface looked at his father, still in his neatly pressed white shirt, plain tie, calm eyes. But for the first time, he noticed something heavier behind those eyes, a shadow he'd never touched before. That night, as he opened the window curtain for some air, Boniface caught sight of a black SUV parked 2 houses down, engine idling. No license plate, dark-tinted windows. The person inside never stepped out. He stared at it for a long time. And the car never moved. The next morning, the SUV was still there. But this time Boniface noticed something else. His father walked past it as if he already knew it would be there. He tilted his head slightly, just enough for his gaze to sweep across the black glass, prompting the figure inside to lower the window by a few inches. No explanation. No expression. But in that moment, Boniface knew one thing. His father's job wasn't just security analysis. And if that was true, then who was watching them? And why? The SUV pulled away precisely at 6:03 p.m., 3 minutes after Mr. Kelly opened his laptop, running an operating system with no icons. The screen displayed a single line: "Secure entry activated. Level 8 protocols engaged." Boniface stood in the corner of the room, watching his father's silhouette quietly typing command lines. A question now burned in his chest more clearly than ever. Who is my father? Really? And the answer? He wasn't ready for it. But the storm was coming, and it would spare no one. That night, in the familiar second-floor apartment at Elmwood Court, the darkness outside was strangely silent. Boniface didn't sleep. After dinner, he used homework as an excuse to stay in the living room, where he could observe his father's office through the slightly ajar door. The clock on the wall read 9:42 p.m. when Mr. Theophilus Kelly received a call with no caller ID. His voice was low, firm, and cold. No, that would mean breaching the classroom system. Activate the peripheral protocol. Use the secondary route. I don't want it pinging the core network of DefenseNet. Boniface held his breath. What was DefenseNet? He'd once thought it was just a word from science fiction movies. But the way his father said, with no hesitation, no need to explain, proved it was something he dealt with daily. The screen in the office glowed faintly, displaying rows of encrypted data scrolling fast, as if a different brain was operating it. Boniface crept closer. He saw his father opening a file labeled M. Manfred. Type R clearance. The name froze him. It was her, Ms. Manfred, his homeroom teacher. The screen displayed every line. Full name, Melissa Ann Manfred, born 1982 in Ohio, graduated from Columbia University, former research assistant at the American Cultural Center in Cairo from 2006 to 2008. Then came the financial section. $18,340 in credit card debt. Wire transfer from an anonymous source last year. $12,800, originating from Luxembourg. She's not just a teacher, Theophilus muttered. Boniface stood paralyzed. What was unfolding now went far beyond classroom humiliation. It was something else, deeper, darker, and more dangerous. On the desk, he saw the badge that had never appeared during the day, a hard plastic card embossed with the Pentagon emblem. Below it, the words read, Top Secret, SCI, Alpha 8, Clearance Only. Under the dim light, the red-coated line seemed to glow. And in that moment, Boniface realized the father he had always believed to be just a simple security engineer was, in fact, someone who held the highest level of access in the United States Defense Intelligence Network. The next morning, the air in the house was quiet. Theophilus still wore a white dress shirt, dark blue tie, and brown leather shoes like any other day. But inside the briefcase he carried, Boniface caught a glimpse of something. A small metallic device shaped like a portable hard drive, but wrapped in RF shielding, designed to block surveillance. 3 days later, during math class, Boniface opened the school-issued tablet to do an assignment. Suddenly, the screen went black, then displayed a line of moving numbers. 16C Alpha Query, execute / tier 8 / Kelly Child. He froze. In less than 3 seconds, the screen flicked off again, as if nothing had happened. When Boniface got home, he told his father. Theophilus only nodded, stood up, locked every door, and turned off the Wi-Fi. From now on, he said, eyes never leaving the laptop. If you see anything strange, one odd word, one odd symbol on any screen, you tell me immediately. No hesitation. Boniface swallowed hard. What's happening, Dad? Theophilus turned to face his son, revealing for the first time a trace of tension in his eyes. You're being watched. And not just you. Your school, your class, even Ms. Manfred. This isn't just about education anymore. Outside, the same black SUV had returned. But this time, there was a second one parked 100 meters away. Same model, also without plates. Its headlights blinked once, then shut off completely. Boniface clenched his fists. He didn't know what he was being dragged into. But one thing was clear. This was no longer just about him. Monday's class began like any other at Bellington Heights Academy, except for one thing. The atmosphere in Ms. Manfred's room simmered with the tension of an inside joke. On the board, Ms. Manfred was listing the parents scheduled to speak at next week's Parent Day. Each student was invited to stand and introduce their parent's profession, a long-standing tradition at the school meant to inspire future ambitions. Every year, CEOs, politicians, and renowned doctors were called by name as representations of success. Kelsey's family: Mr. William Foster, chairman of Foster Holdings; Olivia's family: Mrs. Madeline Rowe, global marketing director of Blue Lark. The list continued with one powerful name after another. When it came to Boniface, Ms. Manfred glanced at the gradebook and said with a deliberately amused tone, "Boniface Kelly, your father is still a Pentagon employee, correct?" The class began murmuring. Boniface stood up. His voice was firmer than the week before. "Yes, ma'am." Ms. Manfred smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Well then, wonderful. If he truly works at one of the most secure facilities in America, why not invite him to speak?" She turned back to the board and wrote in white chalk, "Theophilus Kelly. Confirmed?" Laughter erupted, this time with scattered applause. Kelsey, never missing a moment, called out, "Make sure he wears his security guard uniform. Wouldn't want anyone thinking he's management." Boniface looked around the class. A few eyes avoided his. A few laughed. But this time he didn't retreat. He spoke clearly. "My dad will come. And you'll see." The class period continued in awkward silence. But the name Kelly was no longer a target of dismissal. It became the center of anticipation, wrapped in mockery, and something like caution. That evening, in the small living room where warm yellow LED lights cast shadows over the worn bookshelf, Boniface told his father everything. His eyes couldn't hide his anger and disappointment. "They think I'm lying." The whole class laughed. Even Ms. Manfred turned it into a joke. Theophilus said nothing for a moment. He quietly closed the laptop, streaming reverse-scrolling code on the screen, turned his chair, and looked straight at his son. "Do you want me to come?" Boniface nodded, his gaze steady. "I want them to know the truth. Not because I need to be believed, but because they need to know they were wrong." Theophilus nodded slowly. No excess emotion, only the deep resolve in the eyes that had witnessed political crises and counterintelligence campaigns across the seas. "I'll come," he said. "And when I walk in, everything they thought about you will change forever." That night in the stillness of Elmwood, Theophilus reopened his laptop. This time, he activated a protocol he hadn't touched in 3 years. Protocol Echo 9// Visual Clearance Sequence / Identity Soft Reveal / for Civilian Environment. The system scanned his retina, fingerprinted him, and a brief command was transmitted. Requesting escort team, civilian approach model. Boniface didn't see any of it, but he heard the confirmation chime from the computer. Confirmed. Operation E9 initiated. Estimated execution, 6 days, 14 hours. And just as he promised, 7 days later, Theophilus Kelly would walk through the gates of that prestigious school, not merely as a father, but as the most vivid rebuke to discrimination, and the living proof that some people are underestimated, not because they lack ability, but because others lack the imagination to grasp their power. Parent Day at Bellington Heights Academy had long been a spectacle. A red carpet rolled out in the grand hall, banners stretched across the corridor reading, "Celebrating our future leaders," and each student prepared an elaborate introduction of their parents. The auditorium was equipped with high-resolution projectors, JBL ceiling speakers, and seats arranged according to the family's contributions to the school. But this year, there was one name no one expected to become the center of attention: Theophilus Kelly. At 8:25 a.m., a black Lincoln Navigator L, an armored edition with 2.5-inch bulletproof glass, pulled into the VIP guest parking area. The rear door opened, and Mr. Theophilus stepped out. A sharply tailored navy suit, silver-gray striped tie, and a perfect Windsor knot. On the left side of his chest, a visible Pentagon security badge, the one marked top secret SCI Alpha 8 that Boniface had once glimpsed through the cracked door that night. Right behind the Lincoln were 3 black Chevrolet Suburban SUVs. No license plates, roof lights covered, each with suited men exiting, earpieces in their ears. 2 immediately took up position at the school gate, while the third escorted them inside. Boniface, in his neatly pressed school uniform, stepped out alongside his father. His hand clutched his father's tightly, and the eyes of every student, teacher, and parent in the courtyard seemed magnetically drawn to them. Conversations stopped. Some whispered. Some snapped photos. Ms. Manfrey, who had been standing near the gate to greet parents, froze. For a moment, her lips parted slightly, but no sound came. Boniface looked at her, not from below this time, but at eye level. From the other side of the courtyard, Kelsey was stepping out of a brand new Porsche Cayenne. His father, William Foster, chairman of a $900 million real estate empire, turned to walk toward the hall, but paused the moment he saw one of the agents salute Theophilus in the formal manner reserved for senior commanders. Mr. Foster stopped. Kelsey, just about to make another snide remark, choked on his words when he saw Boniface walking straight ahead, head held high. Principal Kenneth had initially been confused. He had only known Theophilus as a quiet parent who never attended school functions. But when an FBI agent personally escorted him in, and the school's security tablet displayed the confirmation line, Federal Defense Advisor, Special Protocol Clearance confirmed. He immediately stepped out, opened the staff lounge door himself, and bowed slightly as he said, "We are deeply honored to welcome Mr. Kelly. Please, sir, come into the lounge." As a federal security advisor, inside, a few teachers sipping coffee were stunned. One dropped their cup. Someone whispered, "Federal security advisor? Since when do we have someone at that level here?" Boniface was invited to sit next to his father in the speakers section. Ms. Manfred approached, her eyes a mix of panic and a strained smile. She didn't know what to say. But Boniface simply replied, "You asked my father to come. Well, he's here." The main hall echoed with an announcement inviting students, parents, and teachers into the auditorium. Security personnel silently swept their gaze across the room. On the speaker board, the digital screen displayed the list of presenters. Theophilus Kelly's name was last marked with a small blue shield icon, designated by the Department of Defense Security Bureau. No one was laughing anymore. No one mimicked Boniface's voice. Because within just the first 15 minutes of the day, the black boy once deemed different had stepped into the very place they never thought he belonged, the center of respect and quiet awe. The sound of leather shoes lightly striking the classroom floor echoed with quiet authority through a space more accustomed to chalk and math worksheets. Theophilus Kelly stood in front of the whiteboard, without notes, without slides. He simply stood there, with the gaze of a man who had seen things most people only heard through sanitized news broadcasts. The students of Boniface's class, along with parents, teachers, and the school board, crowded behind the back row. Some were even recording on their phones, not because they thought he'd share some sensational tale, but because his presence demanded silence. Theophilus began in a calm voice. No need to raise it, but each word seemed to claim the air. When people measure a person by the color of their skin, they're not just wrong. They're trading their future for a narrow lens. And more importantly, they blind themselves to real dangers. The room was utterly silent. He told a story about the year 2021, when an international hacking group named the Core silently infiltrated educational data systems in over 9 states. Their target? Not bank accounts, but the children of military officers, government officials, and scientists. By posing as classmates, teachers, or even school counselors, they gained access through online games, school email, and learning platforms. You think a classroom is just blackboards and pop quizzes? He glanced at the wide-eyed students. Wrong. This is where every war begins, because children, even when unaware, are always the first target in the world you're not allowed to see. A parent, Mrs. Rowe, the marketing director, raised her hand gently, her voice betraying concern. You mean, schools have already been infiltrated from the inside? Theophilus nodded. Grading software, classroom cameras, even e-book apps, they all have vulnerabilities. While you're busy comparing report cards, there are people out there quietly collecting your children's voices, faces, and routines. For what purpose? To build profiles, to take control. Ms. Manfred, standing in the back with a cup of coffee, suddenly clenched her hand so tightly the lid fell to the floor. Her eyes widened as the mini-screen in Mr. Kelly's hand displayed the words, Core Attack, 2021. Targets: Columbia, Maryland, Austin, Anchorage. A list of compromised schools appeared, and Bellington Heights was highlighted in bold. Ms. Manfred, he said softly, how long have you been teaching here? Almost 9 years. Her voice faltered. Have you ever wondered why this school, with its private network, still experiences recurring system glitches whenever a new student joins the class? She didn't answer. And in that moment, all eyes turned to her, not with respect, but suspicion. A student at the front, perhaps forgetting decorum, innocently asked, Have you ever shot someone, sir? The class held its breath. Theophilus didn't smile. He only dipped his head slightly, then answered with calm finality. My job is to prevent that from ever needing to happen. But if someone threatens my son, or kids like you, I won't hesitate. The air turned heavy, not from fear, but from a truth everyone had ignored for too long, that they had underestimated this man, and the boy they once mocked. Theophilus slowly walked to the back of the room and placed a folder on the desk. Inside is a risk assessment I submitted directly to the Department of Defense on how our education system is being attacked from within, and Bellington Heights is not immune. He turned to Boniface. The boy pressed his lips together and gave a slight nod. No more fear. And in that moment, the classroom was no longer a place for ridicule. It became the place where truth stood tall, unshaken like a fortress, and no one could look away. 11:14 a.m. Amid the final remarks of a senator parent echoing through the main hall of Bellington Heights Academy, a strange sound rippled across the school grounds, not the fire alarm, nor the usual event announcements. Internal alert. Security system is being breached. Central access lock has been disabled. Switching to manual override protocol. The sound came from the internal security panel, normally accessed only by the school's top-tier technical team. Within less than 90 seconds, classrooms were sealed by electronic locks, hallway cameras switched to black and white mode, and the school-wide Wi-Fi signal was disrupted. Theophilus immediately pulled out a personal communication device, a slim black tablet. No branding, marked only with a hexagonal symbol. He entered a 3-tier code, Delta 4 Kilo /99 Bravo /Shadow In. The device connected directly to the Emergency Response Coordination Room of the Federal Security Reaction Agency. This is Theophilus Kelly. Urgent. Initiate Echo Protocol. Target: Bellington Heights System. Probability of internal initiated breach: 82%. Just 5 minutes later, 3 FBI SUVs bearing official seals swept through the school's main gate. Agents dressed in black, carrying electronic override tools, moved toward the central control room. Everyone was instructed to remain in place, except for a small group escorted to the safety basement. Students identified as sensitive targets. Boniface was among them. Initial analysis by the digital forensic team revealed a chameleon-type spyware package, malware capable of adapting to its environment, had been implanted into the system nearly 17 days earlier. The code allowed the intruder to control door access, camera feeds, classroom microphones, and even track student schedules and movement patterns. Worse still, the location of the malware was traced to a secondary server directly linked to Ms. Manfred's classroom. Ms. Manfred was separated for questioning. She stammered, claimed she didn't know anything, and said her computer had been malfunctioning since last month. But the evidence was clear. A USB port not registered to the school had been accessed on the server on the 14th of the previous month, coinciding with the day she received a teacher training package from a suspicious email domain ending in .cyprus.net. When the FBI decrypted the data, they discovered the names of 7 students who had been monitored continuously through the school's security system. Names, photos, class entry and exit times, and routes home. Among them was Boniface Kelly, the son of a man with clearance to the Department of Defense's cyber defense infrastructure. "This is no joke," murmured one agent. Theophilus realized at that moment that this was no longer about personal discrimination. It was a deliberate surveillance and pre-abduction operation, targeting children linked to national power and security systems. He turned toward Boniface, who was now sitting calmly in the safe room with 3 other students, his eyes no longer filled with fear, but with something that looked like an understanding of the things his father had long kept hidden. Outside the bulletproof glass, a red light flashed, signaling that special military support forces were now in position. An agent approached and whispered to Mr. Kelly, "We've identified a signal originating from a nearby location, approximately 700 meters from the school. A mobile transmission, encrypted, likely coordinating the next steps." Theophilus nodded. "I'll lead the response team myself, but first," he looked toward Principal Kenneth, who was trembling with a file in hand. "Bring me the list of all IT personnel from the last 6 months. Include subcontractors." The school was no longer a place where students showcased report cards. It had become a silent battlefield, where intellect, data, and vigilance were the weapons of survival. And in the eye of that storm, Boniface, the boy once ridiculed for saying his father worked at the Pentagon, was now at the center of a national security sweep. 1:32 p.m. Just as Bellington Heights Academy was beginning to settle after the security alert, one of the agents monitoring the cameras suddenly spotted something unusual. A man in a maintenance uniform, with a badge labeled R. Hughes, was crouching by the window of classroom 112 in the West Wing, attaching a small cube-shaped device. That room belonged to the 5th grade students, including one of the 7 listed as high-priority targets. Theophilus was alerted instantly. With a single glance, he signaled to 2 nearby agents. "Perimeter lock. Don't let him escape." The man, realizing he'd been spotted, sprang up, shoved a nearby technician aside, and sprinted down the ground floor hallway toward the cafeteria wing. He didn't run like a panicked intruder, but with the precision of someone trained, gliding through corridors, diverting attention, abruptly shifting direction. The internal alarm blared. A team of FBI agents in body armor rushed in. Boniface, though in the safe zone, was watching everything unfold through the surveillance monitor. He didn't blink, knowing this was no longer a spy game of childhood fantasy. This was real life. The man suddenly kicked open the cafeteria doors, empty now as students had been evacuated, and tried to climb through the emergency window at the far end. But before he could escape, a voice cut through the room, calm and unshaken. "That's enough. He turned. Theophilus was already there. No body armor. No weapon. Just a navy suit. Tie slightly loosened. Empty hands. But eyes as cold as forged steel. The intruder pulled out a karambit knife. A razor-sharp, curved blade, often seen only in the hands of Eastern European mercenaries. He charged, but in just 3 movements. A misaligned sidestep, a wrist-lock twist, and a hip throw. Theophilus had him down. The knife clattered away. The man lay face down, wrists locked behind his back. No sirens, no shouting. It all unfolded like a symphony. Clean, decisive, without a single prelude. By the time agents burst in, the man was already secured. Theophilus stood up, brushed the dust from his shoulder, then pointed to the fabric pouch the man had dropped during his escape. His bag. Open it. Inside, a color photo of Boniface Kelly, taken from behind on the school's football field, not from any school camera. A 2D floor plan of the Kelly home, with red marks on the first-floor windows, back door, and a note section reading, Entry Option C, 0240 a.m. A blueprint of the panic room, the very safe room the Kelly family had installed in their basement in 2018 after a data breach incident in Virginia. And most alarming of all, a handwritten slip containing a 6-character code that matched the emergency access key to that panic room. Kelsey, who once mocked Boniface, witnessed the entire scene from the hallway's glass door. For the first time in his life, he couldn't comprehend the world he lived in, the world where a black father, once dismissed as not high-ranking enough, could command national security with a mere nod. Ms. Manfred was ordered to leave the premises immediately. She wasn't directly implicated, but the coincidence of the foreign device found in her classroom and the movements of the suspect had escalated the situation drastically. Boniface whispered to himself as he watched through the camera. Dad doesn't just work at the Pentagon. He's the reason guys like that run. For the first time, his eyes no longer held fear or retreat, but the gaze of someone who knew, with certainty, he wasn't alone. And the truth, once revealed, carries a weight that makes even the world take a step back. And this was only the beginning of a full-scale counteroffensive. 9:57 p.m. On the quiet street leading to the gray-roofed house at 109 Fort Belvoir suburb, the window lights still glowed softly like every other night. Boniface sat in his study, having just finished a set of advanced geometry problems when the power in the house flickered. A moment later, the entire home plunged into darkness. "Dad?" he called out. No answer. Boniface rushed downstairs. The front door was ajar, no longer secured by the electronic lock. On the kitchen counter, his father's phone still lay there, something Mr. Kelly would never do. Instinct took over, and the boy bolted down to the safe room, just as he had been taught. A room protected by biometric encryption, bulletproof walls, capable of withstanding military-grade shockwaves. He had just stepped inside when the door slid shut behind him, with a metallic click. A thin mist began to seep from the air vents. Boniface coughed, trying to input the emergency override code, but he only managed to glimpse one final red line flashing across the wall. The child in exchange for the Blackfish files. When Theophilus returned home at 10:14 p.m., the main door was disabled, the AI system unresponsive, and all interior and exterior surveillance data from the past 48 minutes had been wiped clean. He didn't call 911. He activated Q4 security clearance, Thor's Call, a protocol reserved for high-value strategic personnel abductions. He entered his son's room. Everything was still intact. But one item was missing from the desk. The Citizen Eco Drive watch he had gifted Boniface the previous year, embedded with a nano-tracking chip only he knew about. He opened the handheld encryption interface and typed KELLY-6X-T HN-Q-91. A single bright dot lit up on the satellite map 138 miles away, an abandoned warehouse district near the Newark port in Delaware. Without hesitation, he called 3 people. Ramirez, the FBI Rapid Response Commander who'd fought beside him in Yemen. Jackson, a veteran sniper who once held a position on the Fallujah Cathedral rooftop for 47 hours without shifting his aim. Williams, a jamming and military comms decryption specialist, known for silently cutting off 12 armed drones using just a handheld device. They departed in an unmarked armored SUV, without lights or plates. They reached the warehouse at 12:42 a.m. The sea wind howled through rusted gaps in the structure, and weathered shipping containers stood stacked like a maze. Ramirez led the approach from the front. Jackson positioned himself atop a water tower across the way, his scope calibrated by infrared waves. Williams jammed all low-frequency signals, cutting off every line of communication within a 1.2-mile radius. And Theophilus, as always, chose the hardest path, the underground maintenance tunnel built during the Cold War, leading directly beneath the central chamber of the warehouse. As he emerged from the iron hatch under the control room, he heard breathing. Not steady, not strong, his son's. The boy was tied to a metal chair, his face lightly swollen, signs of sedation still visible. And standing before Boniface, in the flickering sodium light, was Anton Volk. The man's face bore a scar running from his left cheek down to his neck, the leader of an international mercenary group who had nearly killed Theophilus during Black OP operations 7 years prior in Syria. Volk was presumed dead in the Aleppo weapons depot explosion, but he had survived. And now, he returned, not for data, but for the blood of the man who had once defeated him. "This time," Volk hissed, his voice tinged with Russian, "I'm not after you, Kelly. I'm after what makes you weak. Your son." Theophilus didn't move. "And you're still as stupid as ever. Chose the wrong child, the wrong father." Outside, Jackson reported, "Target acquired. Awaiting signal." Williams activated the electromagnetic pulse. Ramirez prepared the emergency breach. But inside, there were only 2 men, and a memory that had never been buried. And what came next, Volk would never see coming. That vengeance never went cold. And Boniface Kelly's father had never once missed a kill in his life. Inside the cold warehouse, only the sound of metal pipes clanking in the wind and Boniface's labored breathing remained, his eyes still half open from the sedative, his hands bound, legs trembling. Volk held a gun, standing behind him, the muzzle pressed to Boniface's temple, sneering. "You feeling lucky, Theophilus?" Theophilus Kelly didn't blink. His hand remained low, the Glock 19 hidden at his waist, safety already off since the tunnel. He didn't need luck. He only needed the right moment. And it came, not from him, but from the trembling boy in front of the gun. Boniface, though his body felt like lead, suddenly ducked, twisted sharply, and drove a punch straight into Volk's abdomen with every ounce of strength and instinct he had. It wasn't a strong blow, but it was precise, right at the old wound Theophilus had once left in Volk years ago in Syria. Volk screamed, staggering back. In that moment, Theophilus drew his gun. A single shot rang out, striking Volk in the shoulder. He collapsed, never getting the chance to pull the trigger. The West warehouse door burst open. Ramirez stormed in, followed by the rapid response team, securing the entire facility in under 45 seconds. Boniface was carried out by his father himself, still with the same eyes, but now they held the steady gaze of someone who had stared death in the face and didn't give in. Volk's blood pooled across the concrete floor, but every life had been preserved. Minutes later, an MH-6 Little Bird military helicopter circled overhead, extracting the team to the nearest base. The Blackfish file, the highly classified data Volk intended to trade for Boniface, was kept entirely secure. The next morning, the name Boniface Kelly appeared across news outlets like the Washington Chronicle, Defense Weekly, and even CNN's 8 p.m. special. The Pentagon staffer's son escapes kidnapping plot. Father speaks out. It's not just about protecting a nation. It's about protecting the trust of your child. Still, most of the incident's contents were sealed by the Department of Defense. The official report read, "Peripheral security breach with no casualties. The attempted abduction failed. No confirmed evidence of international involvement." At Bellington Heights, the aftermath spread quickly. The rumors around Boniface were no longer laced with laughter, but with a quiet, lingering respect. He returned to class a week later with a small scratch on his forehead. No attempt to hide it. The entire class stood when he entered. No one told them to, but everyone knew. Something had changed. Ms. Manfred, wearing a pale sweater that day, her voice softer than usual, stepped to the front and looked straight at the student she once belittled. "Boniface, you deserve to be trusted. You've always told the truth, and you've always been brave." There was no justification, just a simple apology, genuine enough to begin washing away a long-standing prejudice. From that day forward, Boniface no longer sat at the back of the class. He was invited to represent the student body in exchanges with international education programs. He joined the science and debate clubs, not to prove anything, but because he knew his voice was finally being heard. One late evening, lying beside his new citizen watch, this time engraved with the words, "For the boy who stood up when silence wasn't enough," Boniface closed his eyes and whispered, "They used to mock me. Now, they listen. And I'll never let anyone go through that alone again." The black boy who had once been ridiculed for speaking the truth had now become the symbol of something undeniable. That trust, when held firm, can shake the very walls we once thought unbreakable. And the story of Boniface Kelly isn't just about a black boy mocked in a privileged school. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes truth doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs someone brave enough to hold it. The cost of prejudice isn't just in the pain it causes, but in the missed chance to truly see who someone is. Boniface isn't the exception. He is the evidence of resilience, of loyalty, and why we must never judge a person by what we assume from the outside. What about you? Will you continue to believe in the image others build for you? Or are you ready to listen, look deeper, and question what seemed so obvious? Leave a comment below. Have you ever been misjudged because of your skin color, status, or past? What did you do to prove otherwise? Don't forget to like and subscribe to Black Strength Stories so you won't miss out on deeply inspiring stories that will make you see the world from a whole new angle. Because every story deserves to be told.